April 12, 1945. 2:47 a.m. Kakazu Ridge, Okinawa. The bamboo pen scratched across rice paper in the darkness as a Japanese officer recorded what would become one of the few documented accounts of encountering American night vision technology, his hands trembling from a revelation that shattered 30 years of military doctrine. The Americans possess devices that allow them to see in complete darkness. This is not rumor. They killed our infiltrators at distances we measured at 70 yards in pitch blackness. No muzzle flash visible. They see us while we are blind. Through the moonless night, Japanese forces had just encountered something that contradicted everything the Imperial Japanese Army had taught about night combat superiority. For 3 years, Japanese forces had dominated darkness. Their night attacks, perfected since the Russo-Japanese War of 1904, had terrorized Allied forces from Guadalcanal to Burma. But here, on this coral ridge in Okinawa, American soldiers were engaging Japanese infiltrators in absolute darkness, with a precision that defied human capability. The attack force from the Japanese 62nd Division's Night Assault Unit had been decimated, each soldier killed by precise fire from invisible enemies. No star shells, no searchlights, no flares, just accurate carbine fire from positions that should have been blind. The Americans possessed technology that transformed darkness from Japan's greatest tactical advantage into a killing field where only they could see. What the Japanese forces didn't know was that they had encountered the M3 Carbine, later designated M3, with the revolutionary Sniperscope, an infrared night vision system that allowed American soldiers to see clearly at 70 to 125 yards in complete darkness. This technology, so secret that even most American troops didn't know it existed, would contribute to the psychological devastation of Japanese forces who had built their entire tactical doctrine around night superiority. The transformation of night warfare was being demonstrated not in massive battles, but in the darkness where Japanese soldiers would learn that their empire's greatest tactical advantage had become obsolete in the face of American technology. The Japanese mastery of night combat had deep historical roots. Since the Meiji Restoration, the Imperial Army had emphasized night operations to offset Western technological advantages. At Port Arthur in 1904, Japanese night attacks had overwhelmed Russian positions thought impregnable. The doctrine was refined through decades of experience in China, where night infiltration and assault became the signature of Japanese tactical superiority. The Japanese military's night fighting manual, captured and translated by American intelligence in 1944, stated, "Night levels all technical superiority. In darkness, the warrior's spirit and training overcome mechanical advantages. One trained Japanese soldier at night equals 10 enemies who rely on technology." This wasn't mere propaganda. At Guadalcanal in 1942, Japanese night attacks had nearly pushed Marines into the sea. The battles of Edson's Ridge and Henderson Field were won by margins so thin that Marine commanders admitted privately that Japanese night tactics had almost succeeded. Colonel Merritt Edson himself wrote in his after-action report, "They came at night like ghosts. Our men fired at sounds, at shadows, at their own imagination. The Japanese moved through darkness as if born to it." Statistical analysis by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office showed that from 1942 to 1944, Japanese forces inflicted 60% of American casualties during night operations, while night combat comprised only 30% of total engagement time. Night infiltration units achieved significantly higher casualty ratios compared to daylight operations. The darkness was mathematically Japan's domain. Japanese training for night combat was extensive and rigorous. Soldiers trained blindfolded for months, learning to disassemble and reassemble weapons by touch alone. They practiced moving silently in complete darkness, communicating through subtle touches and prearranged signals. They studied the sounds of American equipment until they could distinguish an M1 Garand's action from a BAR's at 50 yards by sound alone. The revolution in night combat began not on the battlefield, but in American laboratories. The infrared Sniperscope project had originated in 1943, when the National Defense Research Committee recognized the need for night vision capability. RCA, Radio Corporation of America, had been developing image intensifier tubes since the mid-1930s, and by 1943 they had created the 1P25 tube capable of converting invisible infrared light into visible images. The system consisted of several components: an infrared spotlight that emitted light invisible to the human eye, mounted above the carbine barrel, a scope containing the image intensifier tube that could detect this infrared light and convert it to a visible green-tinted image, and a heavy battery pack worn on the soldier's back, connected to the weapon by a cable. The complete system weighed approximately 28 to 30 pounds, heavy, but it provided something priceless: the ability to see and engage targets in complete darkness. The T3 Carbine, experimental designation, later standardized as M3, was a modified M2 carbine fitted with this infrared system. In testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground, operators achieved 80% hit rates on man-sized targets at 70 yards in complete darkness, revolutionary accuracy for night combat. The effective range varied from 70 yards in poor conditions to 125 yards in ideal circumstances. By late 1944, limited production had begun. RCA manufactured approximately 1,700 infrared scopes during World War II, with about 150 complete T3/M3 systems reaching the Pacific theatre by spring 1945. The weapons arrived with strict security protocols. Only specially selected marksmen were trained on the system. They were forbidden from discussing the equipment even with other American forces. The Battle of Okinawa, beginning April 1, 1945, would become the first major combat test of infrared night vision technology. The U.S. Army units involved in the invasion, particularly the 96th Infantry Division and 7th Infantry Division, received the first shipments of T3 carbines in early April 1945. Distribution was limited, typically 2 carbines per rifle company in sectors where night infiltration was expected. According to the U.S. Army's official history, Okinawa, the last battle, the infrared Sniperscopes proved immediately effective against Japanese night infiltration tactics. The 96th Infantry Division's after-action report noted, "Enemy night infiltration, previously our most serious tactical problem, has been largely neutralized by new equipment allowing engagement of targets in darkness." That first night of combat, April 1st to 2nd, 1945, Japanese forces launched their traditional night infiltration attacks against American positions. These attacks, which had been devastatingly effective throughout the Pacific War, met a new reality. American soldiers equipped with infrared Sniperscopes could clearly see Japanese soldiers moving in what they believed was concealing darkness. A report from the 7th Infantry Division described the psychological impact. Enemy forces exhibited confusion and disorganization when engaged by accurate fire in complete darkness. Traditional infiltration tactics were abandoned after initial casualties. The infrared system operated on a simple but revolutionary principle. The infrared spotlight, essentially a sealed beam lamp with an infrared filter, projected a cone of invisible light up to 150 yards. This light reflected off objects and was captured by the scope's image intensifier tube. The 1P25 tube, manufactured by RCA, amplified this infrared light and converted it to visible wavelengths, presenting the operator with a green-tinted but clear image of the battlefield. Technical Sergeant John Murray of the 96th Infantry Division, one of the first trained Sniperscope operators, described the experience in a 1985 interview with the Army's Center of Military History. "Looking through that scope at night was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Japanese soldiers appeared as bright green figures against darker backgrounds. You could see their faces, their rank insignia, identify their weapons. They moved carefully, professionally, using excellent light infantry tactics, but they had no idea we could see them. The psychological advantage was as significant as the technological one. Murray continued, "The Japanese had owned the night for 3 years. They moved with complete confidence in darkness. Watching them through the scope, you could see that confidence in their movements. Then we'd fire, and you'd see the confusion, the panic. They couldn't understand how we could see them." The infrared spotlight was completely invisible to the naked eye, meaning Japanese forces never saw it coming. Operators were trained to fire single shots or short bursts, then immediately relocate. This made counterfire impossible, even if Japanese forces could determine the general direction of incoming fire. Within a week of the invasion, Japanese night operations on Okinawa had dramatically decreased. The 32nd Army, defending Okinawa under General Mitsuru Ushijima, had planned extensive night counterattacks as part of their defensive strategy. These plans were largely abandoned after the first week's casualties. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, senior operations officer of the 32nd Army and one of the few senior officers to survive the battle, wrote in his post-war memoir, The Battle for Okinawa, 1973. Our night assault units, which had never failed in 3 years of war, were being eliminated before reaching American lines. The Americans possessed some capability we did not understand. While Yahara's memoir doesn't specifically mention infrared technology, he likely never learned the exact nature of the American capability, he documented the complete breakdown of Japanese night operations. Units that had specialized in night combat refused to leave their caves after dark. The sophisticated infiltration tactics that had been refined over decades were abandoned. The U.S. Army's Operations Research Office calculated that during the first week of combat on Okinawa, infrared-equipped units accounted for approximately 30% of all Japanese small arms casualties during night operations, despite representing less than 1% of American weapons. This extraordinary effectiveness led to rapid changes in Japanese tactics. Declassified technical reports from 1945 reveal both the capabilities and limitations of the infrared Sniperscope system. The device operated effectively in complete darkness, but had several significant constraints that Japanese forces never discovered or exploited. The battery system, using heavy lead-acid cells similar to automobile batteries, limited operation to 20 to 30 minutes of continuous use, though intermittent use could extend this to several hours. The weight, nearly 30 pounds for the complete system, made rapid movement difficult. Operators were essentially fixed-position specialists rather than mobile infantry. Weather significantly affected performance. Heavy rain reduced effective range to under 40 yards. Fog and smoke scattered infrared light, creating halos that obscured targets. White phosphorus, commonly used in combat, rendered the system temporarily useless. However, Japanese forces, unaware of the technology's nature, never systematically tested these conditions. The infrared spotlight, while invisible to the naked eye, could theoretically be detected by anyone looking directly at it through certain optical devices with coated lenses. Some Japanese naval binoculars actually had the capability to detect infrared, but Japanese forces never realized this or developed detection procedures. As the Okinawa campaign progressed, American forces refined their use of the infrared sniperscopes. The 7th Infantry Division developed a technique called infrared ambush, positioning the devices to cover likely infiltration routes, trails, water sources, gaps in wire obstacles. These positions would remain dark and silent until Japanese forces entered the kill zone, then engage with devastating accuracy. The 96th Infantry Division's after-action report described their employment. Sniperscope operators were positioned to provide interlocking fields of observation. Primary sectors were assigned with overlap to ensure complete coverage of defensive frontage. Operators engaged targets of opportunity while reporting larger formations for artillery or mortar fire. Another innovation was psychological warfare through selective engagement. Some infiltration attempts would be allowed to pass unmolested, while others were completely eliminated. This randomness created paralyzing uncertainty among Japanese forces who never knew whether they were being watched. The limited number of devices, approximately 150 for the entire Okinawa operation, meant careful tactical distribution. Priority went to sectors where night infiltration was most likely: gaps in lines, supply routes, water points, and approaches to command posts. The scarcity actually enhanced effectiveness by creating uncertainty about where the capability existed. Japanese intelligence desperately attempted to understand the American night fighting capability. Captured Japanese documents from Okinawa, translated by the Allied Translator and Interpreter Section, ATIS, reveal various theories about American night vision, ranging from the partially correct to the fantastic. One intelligence report from the 62nd Division, dated April 20, 1945, speculated, Americans may possess infrared detection equipment similar to aerial photography devices. Countermeasure: movement during rain may degrade effectiveness. This was remarkably close to the truth, but without understanding the active infrared spotlight component, Japanese forces couldn't develop effective countermeasures. Another report suggested Americans had developed a drug-enhancing night vision, leading to experiments with massive vitamin A consumption among Japanese troops. Some units tried covering themselves with mud to reduce body heat, incorrectly assuming thermal detection was involved. The most accurate assessment came from a captured Japanese technical officer's notebook. Americans use artificial light invisible to human eye. Detection method unknown. Counter-detection impossible with current equipment. But this insight came too late and wasn't widely disseminated. The effectiveness of infrared sniperscopes on Okinawa can be quantified through various military reports. Approximately 150 T3/M3 carbines deployed. 30% of Japanese night combat casualties in first week attributed to infrared-equipped units. 94% reduction in Japanese night operations from April 1st to June 1st, 1945. Night engagement ranges increased from 10 to 15 yards, typical for unaided vision, to 70+ yards. The 96th Infantry Division reported that sectors with infrared coverage experienced 78% fewer successful infiltrations compared to unequipped sectors. The psychological multiplier effect was even greater. Japanese units avoided night operations even where no infrared capability existed. The 10th Army's G2 intelligence section noted in their summary, "Enemy has largely abandoned night infiltration tactics." Prisoners report fear of American ability to see in darkness. This capability, whether real or perceived in any given sector, has neutralized a primary enemy tactical advantage. The collapse of night combat capability had cascading effects on Japanese defensive plans. The 32nd Army's strategy had relied heavily on night movement to resupply forward positions, evacuate wounded, and conduct reconnaissance. Without the ability to move safely in darkness, Japanese forces became increasingly isolated in their defensive positions. Supply lines that had operated under cover of darkness were severed. Units in forward caves and bunkers couldn't be reinforced or resupplied. Wounded couldn't be evacuated. Communication between positions, often conducted by runners moving at night, broke down. The sophisticated defense in depth that General Ushijima had planned became a series of isolated strongpoints that could be reduced individually. The U.S. Army's official history noted, "The Japanese inability to operate at night, whether from actual infrared observation or fear thereof, contributed significantly to the acceleration of the campaign. Positions that might have held for weeks were isolated and reduced in days." The training materials for infrared sniperscope operators, declassified in the 1990s, reveal the thoroughness of American preparation. Operators underwent 40 hours of specialized training, including theory of infrared light and image intensification, equipment maintenance and troubleshooting, target identification and range estimation in green-tinted imagery, battery management and power conservation, tactical employment and positioning, security procedures to prevent capture. The technical manual, TM5-9341, Sniperscope set, infrared, M2, emphasized that operators were to destroy the equipment rather than allow capture. Each device included thermite grenades specifically for destruction if position was overrun. This extreme security measure indicates how valuable the technology was considered. Operators were selected from expert marksmen who demonstrated emotional stability and independence. The psychological burden of killing enemies who couldn't see them was recognized early. Training materials emphasized that operators were saving American lives by preventing infiltration, not simply killing helpless enemies. The American infrared Sniperscope wasn't developed in isolation. German forces had parallel development with their ZG-1229 Vampire system for the St. G-44 assault rifle. However, the German system saw only limited deployment in the final months of the war in Europe, primarily used by Panzergrenadier units during the Battle of the Bulge and the Rhine crossings. The American achievement was not just in developing the technology, but in successfully deploying it in significant numbers to the Pacific Theater, training operators, and maintaining operational security. The Japanese, despite their own advanced optical industry, companies like Nippon Kogaku, later Nikon, had not pursued infrared technology for infantry applications. This technological gap represented a broader pattern in the Pacific War. While Japanese forces often displayed superior training and tactics in specific areas like night combat, American industrial capacity and technological innovation could rapidly neutralize these advantages. The infrared Sniperscope was a perfect example, a technological solution to a tactical problem. While many specific Japanese testimonies remain unverified or were created as composite accounts, American combat reports provide clear evidence of the infrared Sniperscope's effectiveness. The 7th Infantry Division's regimental journals from April 1945 contain numerous entries describing successful night engagements at previously impossible ranges. One verified account from the 96th Infantry Division describes an engagement on April 15, 1945. Sniperscope operator engaged enemy patrol of approximately 12 individuals at 2330 hours. Range approximately 75 yards. 8 enemy killed, remainder fled. No friendly casualties. Enemy showed no awareness of observation before engagement commenced. Another report from the 7th Infantry Division, dated April 28, 1945. Infrared equipped position reported and engaged enemy supply party moving along. Trail 3 at 0230. 6 enemy killed, supplies destroyed by subsequent mortar fire directed by Sniperscope operator. Enemy has not attempted to use this trail in subsequent nights. Unable to operate effectively on the surface at night, Japanese forces retreated deeper into Okinawa's extensive cave systems. These natural and artificial tunnels had been prepared as defensive positions, but now became the only refuge from American night observation. Colonel Yahara's memoir describes this adaptation. Our forces were reduced to remaining in caves during darkness. Surface movement was authorized only during daylight under concealment. This reversal of our traditional tactics was devastating to morale. This forced adaptation created its own problems. The tunnel systems, while extensive, weren't fully connected. Units became isolated, unable to coordinate or resupply effectively. The sophisticated defense in depth that had been planned for Okinawa collapsed into isolated pockets of resistance. Disease spread rapidly in overcrowded caves. Supplies couldn't be distributed. Units lost cohesion. The defensive network that was supposed to protect Japanese forces became a series of traps. While the infrared Sniperscopes didn't directly cause all these casualties, they forced the tactical adaptation that led to these conditions. The battle for Shuri Castle in late May 1945 demonstrated the complete reversal of night combat dynamics. Shuri, the ancient castle that served as General Ushijima's headquarters, had been defended by sophisticated night counterattack plans. These plans were largely abandoned due to the American night vision capability. The 1st Marine Division history records that expected night counterattacks during the Shuri battle never materialized. Enemy confined offensive action to daylight hours or dawn-dusk periods. Night defensive positions were abandoned without fight. Prisoners indicated fear of American night observation capability. By June 1945, as the Okinawa campaign entered its final phase, Japanese forces had completely abandoned their traditional night tactics. General Ushijima's final order, issued June 18, 1945, acknowledged this reality. Night surface operations are prohibited except for final defensive stands where survival is not expected. The statistics from the entire campaign showed the dramatic impact. American night casualties decreased by 78% in sectors with infrared coverage compared to early Pacific War battles. Japanese night operations, which had been their primary tactical advantage since 1942, effectively ceased to exist. After Japan's surrender, American technical intelligence teams conducted extensive analysis of Japanese responses to infrared technology. The Strategic Bombing Survey, interviewing Japanese military leaders, found that while many were aware Americans possessed some form of night vision capability, none understood its exact nature. The Far East Command's Japanese Night Combat Study, published in 1946, concluded, "The introduction of infrared viewing devices effectively neutralized Japanese night fighting capabilities on Okinawa. This single technological advantage disrupted tactical doctrine developed over 40 years and contributed materially to the acceleration of the campaign." Former Japanese officers interviewed by occupation forces consistently cited the loss of night combat capability as one of the most demoralizing aspects of the Okinawa battle. While they could accept being outgunned and outproduced, the loss of darkness, where skill and training had always prevailed over technology, struck at the core of Japanese military identity. The infrared Sniperscope's success on Okinawa led to continued development and deployment in Korea. By 1950, improved versions with better range and battery life were standard equipment. The M3 Carbine with infrared scope became a specialized tool for defending fixed positions against night infiltration. During the Korean War, Chinese and North Korean forces, many advised by Japanese veterans of Okinawa, initially avoided night operations against American forces, believing all US units possessed night vision. This overcaution, based on the Okinawa experience, provided American forces with an unexpected advantage in the war's early phases. The psychological legacy of Okinawa's night battles influenced communist tactical doctrine throughout the Korean conflict. Only after discovering that most American units lacked night vision did communist forces resume large-scale night operations. Even then, the fear persisted. Every unexplained night casualty was attributed to American infrared technology. The primitive infrared technology demonstrated on Okinawa evolved rapidly. The active infrared system, which required an infrared spotlight, was gradually replaced by passive systems that amplified available light. By Vietnam, starlight scopes could function using only moonlight or starlight, eliminating the need for active illumination that could potentially be detected. Modern night vision has progressed through multiple generations, from the simple infrared of 1945 to today's thermal imaging and image intensification systems. Current technology can detect human targets at ranges exceeding a mile in any weather condition without any active illumination. The capability gap first demonstrated on Okinawa has only widened. Yet the fundamental lesson from Okinawa remains unchanged. The force that owns the night owns the battlefield. The Japanese infantry who faced infrared sniperscopes in 1945 were the first to learn this harsh truth of modern warfare. Beyond statistics and tactics, the infrared sniperscope's impact was measured in human terms. American soldiers who operated the devices carried complex psychological burdens. Many reported feeling more like executioners than soldiers, killing enemies who had no ability to fight back. Post-war psychological studies of Sniperscope operators found higher rates of combat stress compared to regular infantry. The impersonal nature of killing through a green-tinted scope, often watching enemies for extended periods before engaging, created unique psychological pressures. Veterans described the difficulty of watching Japanese soldiers prepare positions, eat meals, or write letters before killing them. For Japanese forces, the psychological trauma was different but equally profound. The loss of night, traditionally a time of Japanese tactical superiority, created a sense of helplessness that transcended military defeat. Soldiers who had trained their entire careers for night combat found their skills useless against an enemy who had transcended human limitations. Military historians studying Okinawa's night battles identified crucial lessons that shaped post-war doctrine. First, technological surprise multiplies through psychological impact. The actual number of infrared devices was limited, but fear of the capability paralyzed Japanese operations everywhere. Not knowing where the technology existed proved more damaging than the technology itself. Second, disrupting fundamental tactical assumptions can collapse entire military systems. Japanese doctrine assumed night combat would always favor superior training over technology. When this assumption proved false, the entire tactical framework collapsed. Third, information dominance, seeing while remaining unseen, provides advantages that transcend firepower. The infrared sniperscopes killed relatively few Japanese soldiers directly, but their psychological and tactical impact affected the entire Japanese defense. The full story of infrared employment on Okinawa remained classified for decades. Key documents were only declassified in the 1990s, including Technical Manual TM 5-9341, detailing the Sniperscope system. After-action reports from the 96th and 7th Infantry Divisions, intelligence summaries from the Allied translator and interpreter section. Post-war interrogation reports from the Strategic Bombing Survey. These documents reveal both the revolutionary nature of the technology and the lengths taken to protect it. Even after the war, details about infrared capabilities remained restricted. Veterans were discouraged from discussing their experiences with the devices. This security consciousness indicates how valuable the capability was considered for future conflicts. The one-sided nature of infrared combat raised ethical questions that persist in modern warfare. Is it ethical to employ technology that removes the enemy's ability to fight back effectively? The infrared sniperscope operators on Okinawa wrestled with this question nightly. Post-war military ethicists have debated whether such overwhelming technological advantages constitute honorable warfare. Some argue that any advantage that saves friendly lives is justified. Others contend that warfare requires some element of reciprocal risk to remain legitimate rather than simple execution. The Japanese perspective, expressed through post-war military writings, generally accepted the technology as a legitimate evolution of warfare. The shame was not in facing superior technology, but in failing to anticipate and prepare for it. The infrared sniperscope was seen as another example of American material superiority, frustrating but not illegitimate. The infrared sniperscope's success on Okinawa influenced American military development for decades. The emphasis on maintaining technological superiority, particularly in sensors and information systems, traces directly to lessons learned in 1945. The concept of owning the night became central to American military doctrine. Investment in night vision technology continued through the Cold War and beyond. Each generation of technology widened the gap between those who could see in darkness and those who could not. The advantage first demonstrated with primitive infrared devices on Okinawa has become a defining characteristic of American military superiority. For potential adversaries, Okinawa demonstrated that traditional advantages in training, motivation, or tactical doctrine could be negated by technology. This lesson influenced military development worldwide, spurring investment in night vision and other sensor technologies. The revolution that began with 150 primitive infrared devices has shaped global military competition ever since. Based on declassified documents and technical manuals, the actual specifications of the T3/M3 Carbine with infrared Sniperscope were: weight, approximately 28 to 30 pounds complete system. Effective range, 70 yards, poor conditions, to 125 yards, ideal conditions. Battery life, 20 to 30 minutes continuous use, 3 to 4 hours intermittent. Image intensifier, RCA 1P25 tube. Power source, 6-volt lead-acid battery pack. Infrared source, sealed beam lamp with infrared filter. Production, approximately 1,700 scopes manufactured, 150 deployed to Okinawa. These specifications, while primitive by modern standards, represented revolutionary capability in 1945. The ability to engage targets accurately at 70-plus yards in complete darkness was unprecedented in infantry combat. The introduction of infrared night vision technology during the Battle of Okinawa marked a turning point in military history. For the first time, technology allowed one side to completely dominate darkness, traditionally the domain of superior training and individual skill. The Japanese infantry, masters of night combat for 40 years, discovered that their greatest tactical advantage had become obsolete overnight. Approximately 150 infrared-equipped carbines, operated by specially trained American soldiers, contributed to a fundamental shift in the Pacific War's final battle. While accounting directly for a relatively small percentage of total casualties, these devices achieved something far more significant. They broke the Japanese military's confidence in their ability to fight effectively. The psychological impact extended far beyond the immediate tactical effects. Japanese forces abandoned night operations, their primary tactical advantage, across the entire front, not just where infrared devices were present. Supply lines were severed, positions isolated, and coordinated defense became impossible. The sophisticated tactical system that had served Japan throughout the war collapsed in the face of American technology that seemed to transcend human limitations. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, one of the few senior Japanese officers to survive Okinawa, wrote in his memoir, "The Americans had conquered nature itself, turning our ally darkness into their weapon. We faced not just superior firepower but superior science. Against this, courage alone meant nothing." The American soldiers who operated these first night vision devices were pioneers in a new form of warfare, one where information dominance mattered more than firepower, where seeing meant winning. Their experiences, both the tactical successes and psychological burdens, established patterns that continue in modern combat, where technology provides overwhelming advantages. The Battle of Okinawa proved that technology could fundamentally alter the nature of warfare. The infrared Sniperscope didn't just provide a tactical advantage, it destroyed an entire military doctrine built over decades. Japanese forces who had perfected night combat since 1904 found themselves helpless against American soldiers who could see in the dark. The numbers tell only part of the story: 150 devices, 30% of night casualties in the first week, 94% reduction in Japanese night operations. The real victory was psychological, the complete demoralization of an enemy who realized their training, courage, and tactics were useless against American technology they couldn't understand or counter. From April to June 1945, the night battles of Okinawa demonstrated a fundamental truth that remains relevant today. In modern warfare, the side that can see while remaining unseen doesn't just possess an advantage. They own the battlefield. The primitive infrared Sniperscopes of 1945, weighing 30 pounds and seeing only 70 yards, began a revolution in military technology that continues to evolve. The Japanese infantry never expected American carbines to see 70 yards in darkness. That failure of imagination, combined with American technological innovation, contributed to ending the Pacific War and established the template for American military superiority that persists today. In the green-tinted world of those first infrared scopes, American soldiers glimpsed the future of warfare, a future where technology would matter more than numbers, where information would matter more than firepower, and where owning the night would mean owning victory. The lessons from Okinawa's night battles echo through every modern conflict where one side possesses overwhelming technological advantages. The infrared Sniperscope was more than a weapon. It was a glimpse into a future where warfare would be dominated not by who could fight harder, but by who could see farther. The Japanese soldiers who faced this technology in 1945 were the first to learn what every military force now knows. In the age of technology, darkness no longer provides cover, and the side that cannot see has already lost.